I mean, I had the other day, I called into a little fish and chip shop in Soho, and I had scampi and chips, which is like a childhood thing for me. And I had scampi and chips and a small bottle of Coke, and it was £32.50. And that blew my mind. But that's where we are now.
Witam serdecznie w naszym podcaście winiarskim. Dzisiaj mamy bardzo szczególnego gościa. Jest z nami słynny szef kuchni, Ashley Palmer-Watts. Ashley, hello.
Hi there.
Welcome to Warsaw.
Thank you very much.
What brought you here?
We came over on Monday to prepare for a dinner on Tuesday with Daniel. And we brought over one of our sous chefs, Mateusz, who's from Poland. So we were invited over and we thought, well, why not? Never been to Poland, so perfect opportunity to come and have a little explore.
Have you enjoyed Polish food so far? Have you had the opportunity to try any?
Yeah, it's been great so far. I mean, we had, we're at Butcher and Wine on Monday. And then we obviously had the event last night, and then we ate here today. I can't say the name of the restaurant actually, but yeah. But yeah, no, we've had some really good food and great hospitality. It's been brilliant.
Polish food isn't exactly world famous, and it's not very notorious in the UK, even though you've got 1 million Polish people working in the UK, especially in the hospitality industry. Yeah.
I mean, I thought it would probably be, like Mateusz always tells me, it's cabbage and it's sausages and, potatoes and broth and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say I've had lots of traditional Polish food, but we're only here a couple of days, so it can be a little bit one-sided, I suppose, in the restaurants that we've been going to.
Not so easy to eat traditional food in many countries these days. Yeah, everything has been so much modernized. What has been your experience with British food, going down that road? I think if you search out, especially, all over England, I think as well, especially London, you get your really focused British restaurants that are bringing the old historical stuff back. I mean, you've got the traditional stuff and then you've got the historical stuff. So traditional, English dishes are just well-cooked, homely, approachable, tasty dishes, which is kind of what we do at the Devonshire, really. Yeah, like what?
Lamb hot pot, for example. Suet pudding, so a steamed pudding with meat inside. We use beef cheek, Guinness, onion, a little bit of carrot, and just a traditional gravy, and it's steamed in the oven. What else? Obviously, you've got the stereotypical fish and chips that you can find in certain little pockets, and there's great ones and there's really poor ones. But yeah, and then, where I was before, the restaurant called Dinner by Heston, was really going back as far as 1300 in the manuscripts and old historic recipes and bringing a contemporary version forward into the modern day, which is quite good fun. So that's another level other than traditional.
Yeah, can we talk about this? Because I'm fascinated by food history, and I think many people are looking back to the future, for inspiration. One of your signature dishes is the meat fruits, which is also a kind of recreation of that sort of old way of cooking. So what's so fascinating about that?
Well, I think anyone from their own country to be able to go back. I mean, there's been a big movement from it in terms of in what we were doing in England at the time. You've got Denmark and the sort of Scandinavian countries really looking back at their tradition and their sort of forgotten history, I suppose, of food and bringing that forward. So I think there's been a lot of people that have been looking back, which is, you get a really patriotic kind of passion for that kind of, something rooted in history that you can bring into the modern day. Feels really quite special, and it's the patriotism behind that history. I think it's quite interesting, especially if it's been forgotten, and that was an important thing for dinner, for sure.
But the way people ate in past centuries was completely different from today, not only in terms of ingredient, but also dishes were, much heavier, also often quite sweet compared to how we eat today. So do you think you can really reconcile that with, what people are really looking for today?
Yeah, I mean, we had great success with dinner. I think there's cultural change that happens over hundreds of years.
obviously the sweetness that was, back in the 1500s was more about showing your wealth, and, eating was and still is to a certain degree a form of entertainment. There was far less entertainment back then. But now, the joy of going to lovely restaurants around the world is about entertainment and that sort of conviviality of what happens at the table. So I think part of the cooking historically has been about hiding bad flavors and masking certain stuff, especially in the world of wine. One day the wine is white, and then the next day they might add something else, change it into a red wine, for example, if it's got off flavors, and try and flavor it into being palatable, I suppose. So obviously those days have changed somewhat, which is great. But yeah, I think food, entertainment, and enjoyment is still something that has survived, and maybe it's at the pinnacle of the food that we eat on a daily basis, but still there's no better thing than going to a really great restaurant that you're really interested in.
What about art? Is cooking an art?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think when you look at creativity, there's different forms of creativity, obviously. You've got the more simplistic view of creativity as solving a problem, not necessarily dreaming up something that's wacky and new and unique. So I think there's varying degrees, but I would say the feeling and experience you want people to have when they come to your restaurant is really more than just what's on the plate, if you know what I mean. Like, I think traditionally we've always thought about how is this dish going to be to eat, and how is it from start to finish, or you look at it as that entirety on that one dish, that one plate or bowl. Whereas when you start thinking about how you make people feel in a restaurant, it's everything from the flowers to the way the glass feels and the table, everything. So I think
the experience.
Yeah, the experience and the feeling that you give to people, I think, is really, really quite important, and that is an art form. It's not normal. It's some are better at it than others, and some people don't get it right.
I also meant whether you consider yourself an artist, being a chef, but personally, not the whole establishment of the restaurant.
I don't really think about it like that. I think an artist in a traditional sense, probably not, but I love creating things. I love creating memories and experiences. I'm quite into my photography, and that's an art form, I suppose. On one hand, it's just a different output of art. Food is a different output. Experience is a different output. Painting and drawing, I'm rubbish at, like 100%. I am definitely not an artist in that sense. But no, I mean, I think I've never really thought about it like that. I think I'm a chef and a restaurateur. I like to create things that probably don't exist. I get a big buzz out of that. Or do things that need challenging, maybe in sort of recently in the spirits world or in the coffee world. And I just enjoy that process, really, of disrupting it a little bit and maybe asking a few questions. Why is it done like that? And see what happens.
The social status of chefs has skyrocketed in the last 20 years. Yeah, I mean, since you started, it's really become, quite a celebrity occupation for the top chefs. Yeah. Does that reflect that, the fact that people would see chefs as artists in a way, or?
I mean, I think, those that came before my generation, certainly, the early days of Marco and Nico, Pierre Kaufman, and, that ilk of chefs in the UK, for sure, sort of made it cool. And then I guess I certainly didn't get into it to try and be cool or to be considered like that. I just loved it, and I loved where it took me and the experiences I had, whether it was travel or or enjoying great restaurants in London or wherever. I think, I mean, it's a strange one, isn't it now, especially today's world where social media, you have very, very famous people that really aren't very good at anything. They're just famous because they're famous, right? Whereas I've never done what I do to kind of achieve that. I'd rather we just do what I try and do every day, and not, so I think the whole famous thing it's a very strange thing, really,
You said you didn't want to become, you didn't do cooking to become famous, but you really, really wanted to be a chef. I read about your background. You were incredibly committed. Yeah, nothing could stop you from achieving.
I nearly joined the army, and I was 3 months too young. But in that 3 months, I really changed my mind, and I just saw the opportunity that. I mean, I come from a rural part of Dorset in the south of England, and I think the restaurant that I was working at, I started off washing dishes and going in every day after school. The husband, who was the chef, was Canadian. The wife was English, but lived in Canada and Stockholm for 10 years. So the world that I was exposed to was a little glimpse at a life that I could probably experience that was wider than where I came from. Mm-hmm. It just seemed like a great idea. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I followed that path, really, to be honest.
And not the army.
No, I think I mean, the army is a seriously hard job, and it's a very serious occupation, and it's massively important, a proper job. Whereas we just cook for people that can afford to eat it and come to our restaurants and stuff. So it's quite indulgent, really, isn't it?
You've been incredibly successful as a chef, amassing Michelin stars. I wanted to ask you, because since the pandemic, there have been various voices that fine dining, the Michelin star restaurants is probably just going to die out. Do you agree with that? Do you think casual dining is cooler in the long term?
You know what? I think, I was listening to something the other day, and someone said it was in relation to fashion. And it kind of stuck with me. It was like, the only thing you can guarantee is that in the future, things are going to change and it will be different. And that is going to be constantly different. So I think this is really true of where restaurants are at the moment. I mean, if I take the UK, the whole of the UK, to be honest, but the real concentration of restaurants in London, for example, you have everything from the finest end, 20 covers, even 12 covers, to be honest, £350 for the menu, all the way down to what I would call street food, but in a shop-fronted unit. And I think the economics run in tandem to this ever-evolving evolution of what people are looking for, the next thing, because we're always changing. What's in fashion today is not going to be in 2 years' time. Same with wine. I mean, I even found that with myself. At certain times, I would be really into certain grape varieties or styles of wine. And then after a while, I evolve onto something else and something else and something else. And you think, actually, that's quite incredible. So I think we could apply this to everything. It's becoming harder and harder to run a viable, high intensity of labor restaurant, which tends to be the pinnacle of that fine dining.
Because of the cost?
Because of the costs, the raw materials, food, drink, just the economy. I mean, people are spending money differently now. We find in England that I think people generally will go out less, don't mind spending the money, but are doing it far less often than they used to. And things do cost a lot of money. I mean, I had the other day, I called into a little fish and chip shop in Soho, and I had scampi and chips, which is like a childhood thing for me. Mm-hmm. And I had scampi and chips and a small bottle of Coke, and it was £32.50. And that
that blew my mind. But that's where we are now, right? So I think there's always an occasion for great fine dining. You've just got to make sure that if you're charging, you know, 150, 200 plus, up to £500-600 a head, it's got to be value for money, you know, and value is what is your perception, isn't it? What you think is a really great one. Actually, that's probably a bad analogy. You're more technically gifted with wine than I am, but you know, if a wine, I don't really appreciate it and it costs £5,000, that's really poor value to me, right?
Yeah.
But you may say, well, actually, I understand. There's only, I don't know, 100 bottles of this left in the world. To me, that's great value, you know? So I think it's you can apply it to everything, wine, fashion, cars, everything has just gone up.
But apart from cost, you know, people have been looking differently at the whole experience of sitting 4 hours with a meal, the theatrical aspect, you know, the fact that there's not a lot of food on the plate. Of course, we know that it's, you know, you could say that about many things, but, you know, is the approach to cooking going to change perceptively?
I think our taste has changed. I mean, it is constantly changing. What we're looking for now, I would say, in the UK, there's a lot more fire cooking. There's a lot more cooking over charcoal, that gutsy, rich, very sort of primitive style of flavor and intensity. But I think there's a time and a place for sitting down for 4 or 5 hours and having the most incredible experience. And I went to one on the west coast of Wales called Innisea Hall, which has got 2 Michelin stars. It's a small, almost like restaurant with rooms, so middle of nowhere. Took 5 hours to get there. And we probably had 35 dishes, but it was really lovely pace. It became effortless, and it wasn't like waiting, and then a tiny little thing arrived. It was just seamlessly, it was beautiful, the whole rhythm of the thing. And you got to the end and went, this is amazing. Like, I had such a great experience. Do I do that every week? No, I don't, because I don't really have time. We have less time now than we ever had before. So all of these things are contributors, I think. So, but I mean, that's the brilliant thing. And people ask that question all the time. Is it dying out? It's becoming harder to make it viable. And also people's tastes are changing, but there'll always be all of those different experiences, I think, in the UK, for sure.
You've mentioned wine. So what sort of wine currently resonates with you?
Wine. So I love white Burgundy. But I like New World Chardonnay as well. I spent a lot of time in Australia. So that to me has a real sort of a very emotional connection to the wines that I was exposed to over there over the course of 6 years. I love Rieslings. I love a sort of what's the other one over there? Wine's gone blank. I'm more into white wine. Red wine really gives me a headache a lot of the time. I don't know why. So I love red wine, but I don't drink that much of it. But I love a good traditional steely Riesling. But I love that sort of discovering other things or a great variety that feels like it's white Burgundy, but it's from somewhere completely different, you know.
Yeah. English wine, Dorset makes some wine now.
Yeah, English wines, I think sparkling wine, I think is amazing. Have I really had any English wine that, like white wine? It's okay. It's not there yet for me. I don't think. Sparkling wine is incredible. I hope if we could get to the same level with just normal white wine, that would be incredible. It may be the grapes that we're growing. I don't know. I'm not an expert.
Or the approach.
Or, you know, I think great winemaking regions have taken years to get to where we are now. We can't, you know, it's it's like when chefs start growing their own produce in the field behind the restaurant. You're not going to grow like someone who's been growing a certain, I don't know, type of asparagus for 35 years in 2 generations. I think that's very apparent with the wine. But yeah, red wine, nah, not from the UK. Not that I've had. I haven't had them all, to be fair.
There are quite a few good wines, but yeah, different topic. What's the role of wine in your cooking? Do you ever design a dish with, a certain pairing in mind?
These days, no. But I mean, we have in my old Fat Duck days, one of the desserts that was created there was called Botrytis cinerea, which obviously you know very well. And it was breaking down all of the sort of the different flavor molecules within that sort of profile and creating them into a dessert that looked like a bunch of grapes. And that was an incredible dessert. I mean, it blows anyone's mind, but especially someone in wine. I think you couldn't get a dish that's more made for a sommelier, I don't think.
Yeah. It was fun to design, fun to make, or hard?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't really have much to do with it other than eating and tasting and sort of giving my sort of thoughts on the dish as a quality thing. But yeah, I mean, it was brilliant. I mean, when you start breaking down the individual flavors, you've got this blue cheese component and you think, blue cheese, well, hold on a minute. But then actually when you eat through the whole dish, it was absolutely mind-blowing, which is very interesting. But there are those magical pairings that you do have, and sometimes they come along afterwards, and maybe something you don't think is going to works brilliantly well. So
in Poland, about 50% of what people order in high-end restaurants in terms of wine is the wine pairing that would designed by the sommelier. And I think clients, I guess, often wonder how is that developed? How closely do the sommeliers work with the chef? Do you need to modify the dish a lot just because they have an idea of a wine that they want to put on the pairing?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the way we've always worked, the food and the dishes were so important in what they were trying to achieve, because it wasn't just the restaurant at the Fat Duck, for example, or dinner. That it was about finding something that worked for that, but bringing in the wine team as part of the development process, so they can start thinking about and exploring rather than getting to a Tuesday night and a new dish is going on and saying, right, we need to pair something with this. It was more collaborative than that. And I think there's a lot of crossover between chefs and sommeliers in terms of the thinking process and we're making something. You are exploring a world of wine and finding something that's made that goes with that thing. And that's really the approach we've always had.
But I do meet chefs who never drink wine and they have a very vague idea about wine, which is fine. They cook very well, but that's not your approach. You're exactly the opposite. No,
I think it's, you'll find people that don't really drink wine, and I don't think they would probably be able to. A chef can't do what a sommelier does, and it's like you need all of these parts of a great restaurant. Like, normally chefs aren't great pastry chefs to a high degree.
Yeah.
But it's about having a great relationship with your pastry chef to integrate. It doesn't become the pastry chef's desserts. It's about the restaurant and the experience and that vision and tying their skill into your vision of what you're trying to create and working together collaboratively. So I think chefs and sommeliers work in a very similar way in the way of thinking, I think.
What about other drinks? It's now quite fashionable. We see it in many restaurants to have, pairings based not on wine, but, spirits, beer, cocktails.
Non-alcoholic.
Yeah. Is that something that you'd order, for example, when you go to a 2 or 3 stars?
Do you know what? I've changed a bit over the years. I think I used to be always about the pairing and
and the dishes. It depends on the restaurant. If the food is really, it's going to be quite challenging and sort of progressive, then the pairing's probably a good way to go. But actually, I'm not a normal customer because I'm a chef, but if I'm looking at a menu and think, well, actually, I'll probably start with, a Riesling style and then get richer and richer as I go through and just try and pick a nice couple of bottles. But there's nothing worse than when you go for a wine pairing and you're just like, it's not really my cup of tea in wine. Like, I'm not a massive fan of natural wine, for example. Mm-hmm. I like traditional, clean, well-balanced things. I don't want to drink something really funky. It's interesting. And it can be really good. But sometimes when it's trying to be too clever, I just don't enjoy it. And I just think, if you go back a few steps to what our conversation is, we don't go out as much as we used to, right? So when I do go out, I don't want to feel like I've missed out or wasted my time.
Yeah.
By going along with something or being talked into a bottle of wine and, oh, no, it's not that. It's not that funky and it's this and it's that. It's quite classic.
What you're saying is not going to make you very popular with many sommeliers, yeah? Because it's now the craze, really, of the wine world.
Yeah, but you know what? I don't really care. I mean, it's a thing of, it's fine if you like that kind of thing. But if you don't like that kind of thing, then, you try and... I think the thing is, it might be a bit controversial, I suppose, but I think the skill of a good sommelier is tapping in to what the guest wants, right? And if that's what I want, and then it's about presenting me with a step to the left, a step to the right, but not over here, right?
Yeah.
And you get some sommeliers that are great at this, and you get sommeliers that are over here, and before you know it, you've got something, and you're like, I wish I'd gone with my gut feeling, And I'm an insider. A lot of people find wine really daunting, and that's
because of that. You think?
Because they don't know much about wine. So generally, most people that feel intimidated when you have a big wine list and a sommelier, if they haven't got that skill of coming into where you've got a minute to find.
Just scan it through, yeah.
To find what that customer is and what they're looking for, what their level is, how much they're looking to spend, what sort of style they want, and not. I think I've had it before where you can be intimidated, and if I'm intimidated as being a chef, then normal people from the street are certainly going to be intimidated. So a really great sommelier for me is about tapping into where that guest is and taking them slightly. Oh, well, if you love white Burgundy, you should try this from this country. It will blow you away. Not over here, because that's not.
Yeah. And how is it that people are so intimidated with wine, but usually very relaxed about food?
I think food we eat every day. Wine, probably, for a lot of people, they don't drink wine every day. I mean, there are a lot of people that do, obviously. But it's that knowledge. It's very specialized wine. What compared to what I know about wine will be hugely different, And I think when you have that lack of knowledge, it's very similar to coffee. Most people know nothing about coffee. Yet the coffee world will speak to the consumer about altitude, variety, process, Jimmy's farm.
Same as wine.
Exactly the same. And they go, oh, do you know what? I don't know anything about it. I'll tell you what, I'm going to stick with what I know. And they don't go anywhere else. So I think this is very, very similar. It's about information that you hold, and the intimidation when you don't know that is about making people feel comfortable and taking them on a little journey,
You've become a coffee trader, can I call you this? How has that happened?
For that very reason, really. I mean, I spent half of my time for 6 years in Australia, in Melbourne, when we had a restaurant out there. And the coffee culture was it blew my mind.
And I learned so much, worked with the most incredible roasters out there. And just coffee became a real passion. But for the reason I just explained about this sort of top of the market, talking to 99% of the market in a way that they simply don't understand. In a way now that wine, if you go to a supermarket, people in the UK now sort of know what they're looking for. And there's a way of describing wine and talking about wine that's broken down those barriers, not made them feel stupid. And they start to explore themselves. And we're 30 years down the road of that wine journey. To where, from 30 years ago to where we are now is a completely different story, right? Yeah. Coffee is way behind that, in my opinion. It still talks to people in a way that is unidentifiable, to making an informed choice on the style of coffee that they think they're going to like. It's too technical a lot of the time. So I really wanted to be able to use my skill in creating coffee blends of varying styles, a bit like the champagne houses do, like Laurent Perrier, for example, with their cuvées, blending the best wine into Laurent Perrier rosé. There's a lot of people that can imagine, because they can remember what that tastes like. And that's what we're trying to do in coffee, and sort of make it easy for people to understand, to say, actually, that sounds right up my street. I'm going to go for that. And then do it in all the different formats. You don't have to have an espresso machine. It can be a coffee bag, or it can be a capsule, or it can be whole bean for your machine. It doesn't have to be top of the tree stuff.
Creativity again, yeah?
Yeah, creativity and breaking down boundaries and being able to communicate into a comfortable place where people can make an informed choice.
Has this experience with coffee sort of cross-fertilized, your cooking, your recipes, the way that you approach your work as a chef?
Yeah, I think a lot of, if I take Devonshire, for example, I've been cooking for a long time, and at various different end results, let's say the 3-star, massive 2-star, 300 covers a day in London, to an airport restaurant, 1,500 covers a day, but really very fast. So when we sat down and we went through the menu that we were going to sort of develop for the Devonshire, it was about the best ingredients sourced to a fairly high volume. A lot of direct sourcing as well. So direct to the abattoirs, the fishermen, the divers, etc. And then putting rigor and detail into the recipes to allow a large team to achieve a very high level of consistency and quality with quite a light touch to the ingredients, but enough complexity in there to make the experience just like, if I take lamb, for example, the lamb from Cornwall, we age for 14 days in our own dry ager downstairs. We have 3 full-time butchers down there. They're much faster than chefs at everything to do with meat. And we take the fat caps off and we render that down. And then when it's cold, we infuse picked mint leaves. It's a weighed amount of fat, a weighed amount of mint leaves, 24 hours. You gently warm it just so it melts, and then you pass it. And then literally we grill the lamb chops over coals, brush it with the minty lamb fat just before serving, job done. You eat the lamb chop and think, well, it's just 3 lamb chops. But actually the complexity of fat, that lovely light mint and the salt and the pepper.
It recreates a traditional British way of serving lamb.
Exactly.
What we were talking about before. Yeah?
It's a really good analogy of the little touches that make the difference. But actually, it's still a lamb chop that looks like a lamb chop on a plate.
Yeah. So we've been talking about creativity and art, but now you've mentioned rigor.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency, rigor, discipline. How important is that to you as a chef?
Oh, massive. There's no point creating something or putting something on the menu that is going to be, unachievable or consistently unachievable. It's a very fine balance between pushing the team further than they would probably push themselves, but actually being able to achieve consistently. There's no good being good on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and when it's really busy on Friday and Saturday. It's not as good. And you're always going to have blips. You're always going to have problems. You're always going to have mistakes. And that's the human side of trying to execute something. But what we try and do in these recipes is to put this sort of precision in that minimalizes the opportunity for people to make mistakes. They still have to think, they still have to care, they still have to taste, they still have to do everything a chef does, but just use a little bit more precision and measurement towards the end goal will go a long way. And self-discipline is massive, because if people don't care, then you're going to have up and down. And that's really, then it comes into team dynamics and running a team and inspiring a team to care, to make a difference and go the extra mile and work together. And our service side of the Devonshire is massively important as well. It's about making people feel really, really happy and safe and comfortable. And it's about something that's not right, putting it right. Whatever you got to do to make that situation right, let's do it.
You've been in the restaurant business for quite some time now. Do you ever feel exhausted or, bored or burnt out?
No, not really. I mean, I've been really fortunate to have sort of, I'd say I'm probably in the fourth phase now. My first phase was, 7 or 8 years in Dorset, growing up from, a young boy at 12 to leaving at 20, to my Fat Duck days of probably the golden era of that restaurant, 2000, 2008. And then I moved out of the kitchen on a day-to-day basis to go and open Dinner by Heston. We also opened the Perfectionist Cafe. And that was the third phase. And now the fourth phase has been a little bit more, obviously we all went through COVID, which is something that we'd never experienced before. But out of COVID, being able to use those previous 3 phases of, learning how to be a chef, the creativity side, the practical side, and venturing into coffee, venturing into spirits, co-founding the Devonshire. It's a little bit, what's the word? You're very fortunate to be able to apply a way of thinking and curiosity and being inquisitive to try and make a difference and make something really tasty has been really amazing in this fourth phase.
Why I ask you is that the restaurant trade doesn't get super good press these days. It's often called a very challenging environment for people to work in.
Yep.
There's much more talk about the psychological impact it has on people. Very long hours, high stress.
Yeah.
How do you see that from the perspective also of an entrepreneur?
I think there's not one simple answer here. I think in no particular order. We worked incredibly hard, made massive sacrifices, but had a great time and wanted to do it. I'd like to think we were quite forward thinking at Fat Duck to how to treat people, how to run the team, how to run the kitchen. It was based on respect and self-discipline before discipline ruled. And the old style was discipline and, this sort of suffering, let's say. And you know what? You can still find that today, 100%, but we've come a long way as an industry. And I think we're in a very strange period where when we were here last night, for example, there was a really positive energy about this industry. And most of them were chefs and restaurateurs. I think there were a few service front of house teams at the dinner.
sometimes when you get together in the UK, for example, it's the reality of the difficulty at the moment, but it's quite, everyone talks about the negative side, or we're looking back over the last 10 years and, you've got to look forward. And the only way it's going to change is by everyone doing their bit to change and not working people 80 hours a week anymore. Those days are gone, and at the Devonshire, we pay by the hour, we pay weekly. And if someone, we don't expect anyone to work over 45 hours. If they want to work 50 hours or 55 hours because whatever reason they're, supporting their sister through medical school or, the real life situations.
Yeah. We just have the guts to do it. Yeah?
And they're 25 and they can work hard. I've worked way harder than that. And, it's about looking after people and making sure that you're a little bit more flexible. But we don't expect anyone to work over 45 hours at all. Those days are gone.
But that has also created a challenge for restaurateurs, right? I mean, you could rely on people much, much more strongly than you can now. Yeah,
yeah, but I think that's our responsibility to think around the challenge, think around how am I going to work around this, and either do what I've always, I've been shown to do by the generation before. I'm just going to keep doing the same thing. You'll have people that just follow what they've been taught. Or you've got those that are bold and not afraid to go, actually, I can't do this anymore. Right, what can I do to help support my business? Or I reshape it a little bit. Maybe I can't do tasting menu only. Maybe I need more customers. Maybe I have to do a la carte. Or maybe I need to open more or less or longer or shorter. And I think that's down to, it's creativity at the end of the day, because it is solving a problem. You have a challenge, you need to creatively think and reshape your business. So I think there are people that are doing that and they are able to reshape their whole ecosystem. And there's others that just aren't, and they're not able to. They don't have the bandwidth to do it, or they're too stubborn and they don't want to do it.
Yeah. This is a wine podcast, so a question I always ask is, what simple bottle of wine are you going to open tonight, or the next time that you open a simple bottle of wine just for yourself?
Oh, a simple bottle of wine. Is this my ideal wine?
Your everyday wine.
Oh, my everyday wine.
Go-to wine.
Do you know what? I as I am getting older, I probably drink less, but I drink better quality. So I would probably, do you know what, if I was at home tonight, I'd probably open something like, I love Au Bon Climat, the Chardonnay from California. I think that's very nice. Or 10 Minutes by Tractor from the Mornington Peninsula, Chardonnay, Judd Chardonnay. That would be right up my street.
That's a rather nice everyday wine.
Well, it's not, I don't drink every day, right? So my everyday is probably, I probably only drink one bottle a week now, if that. So it's about quality and memories and something that I really am going to enjoy rather than just having a glass of wine for the sake of having a glass of wine, That's my thing.
Ashley Palmer-Watts, celebrity chef, co-founder of the Devonshire. Thank you very much for being with us.
No problem, pleasure.
Dziękuję Wam bardzo za oglądanie naszego podcastu.